Welcome to the FounderVideo podcast, an interview series bringing you the latest and greatest info on B2B marketing, revenue operations, and go-to-market strategy from respected experts. Here is your host, Will Martin.
All right, so we are here for the 24th episode of the FounderVideo podcast. Today we have with us Itamar, B2B Ads consultant. We're here to talk about LinkedIn ads, creative, the importance of reach over frequency. Well, not necessarily reach over frequency, but like cold versus retargeting, full funnel strategies, how to convey a complex product over a single ad for B2B SaaS, stuff like that. It's a pleasure to have you and welcome.
It's a pleasure being here. Thank you for having me.
Nice. So the first thing that I would like to start with, it's because, and for context to the audience as well, we spoke over a call because I was curious to know more about your process. And, I saw some of your ads on LinkedIn and I was like, this is really great stuff, right? Some of the ads that you publish, I think it shows that there's research behind them, that you're, thinking deeply about how to convey the value prop there. And you also use paid actors and whatnot. We'll talk about that later. But like, the most important question here is, how are you getting cold traffic to convert through ads for 50K and above ACV B2B SaaS products?
So, I'm trying to think how to answer this question without making it too simplistic, because essentially its answer is simple. Behind it, there's a lot of very complex processes. There are very complex processes, but the answer is simple. I create great ads that convey the value and, more importantly, the capabilities of the product, what the product actually does. And then I distribute those ads to the ICP and invite them to learn more in the website, where they'll also book a demo. So, it's pretty straightforward. I think that the reason that it's not so clear to everyone that it's doable, that cold traffic can convert into demos booked, is mainly because, two reasons. First of all, I think that many B2B SaaS don't invest not enough thought and not enough resources into their creatives, as they'll spend a lot of money on ad spend, but they'll treat the creative part as an afterthought. Okay, they'll often even delegate it to the designers, which are not the function that should own this part. That's one thing. And another thing is this ideology that's sort of developed in B2B SaaS, according to which you need to do something that people call full funnel ads, full funnel marketing, where you start off with some ebooks, and then after you do that, you retarget those people who downloaded the ebooks, and you show them more content about the product. And only after that, like for the third layer, you start asking them to book demos. And I think that that's not the way to go. My experience has been that that's not the way to go, because, really, if you look at the way it's been done at B2C2B companies, I'm talking about companies such as Monday.com or Asana. Those are companies that sell, they don't sell in 50K contracts, but like in 2 or 3K. And that's how they do it. They just create great ads, and they just ask the customers, the prospects, to sign up or book a demo.
So you're saying that if it's for an ACV, like, does that imply, because you put Monday.com as an example, of course that's a 3K ACV, well, depends on the plan, but like, does that mean that for a higher ACV, like 50 and above, this approach wouldn't work? Or I'll let you develop it. Yeah.
So the thing is this: selling a 50K ACV product is not dramatically different on the dimension side from selling a 3K ACV product. It's totally different from the sales side. Yes? But from the marketing side, it's not dramatically different. What's different is that the products are usually very different. 3 KACV products are often very simple. Products like Calendly, like Monday.com, any project management tool out there. In contrast, when you market 50K products, they are often much more specialized. They target specific departments, specific functions. They often only target enterprise buyers. They answer very complicated needs that make it more difficult to create compelling ads. They make it more difficult to explain even what the product does in a banner or a short video. And I think that's also the challenge that most B2B marketers face, that leads them to develop this ideology of full funnel marketing. But in order to really generate pipeline from your ads, you need to stay with the difficult question, with the difficult challenge of conveying your value proposition, conveying your product's capabilities in 30 seconds and distributing it to your ICP.
But isn't the thought process of building a full funnel strategy as follows? Like it's not so much of dropping the, correct me if I'm wrong here, but this is my take, the way I see it and the way I think and why I think full funnel marketing has been brought up, and like these full funnel strategies are being built. I've built full funnel strategies for many clients on LinkedIn ads, right, through retargeting, whatever. Like I've done this. So why I think can be a good answer to the same issue, being the issue how to convey the value prop of a complex B2B SaaS product. Maybe the answer is not only in I need to create this one ad and get it right. And sure, that's an exercise that you should be doing. But like getting to that ad, it's exponentially harder than getting 5 to 10 natural looking ads that can convey that value prop, maybe in not a so much short time frame and maybe with a little bit more budget, but surely enough in a deeper way even.
Well, first of all, I think that you should be able to convey your product's capabilities in 30 seconds. Even if you're a super sophisticated AI tools that only sells to data teams in Fortune 500 companies, you should find a way to sum it up in 30 seconds. Otherwise, you have a product marketing issue. And the thing is that most...
Oh, you're right.
The thing is that most full funnel strategies I've seen are not discussing the product enough. And it's not surprising because if you need to generate 10 different, 30 seconds bits of video, there's often not enough material to talk about the product. You talk about the industry, you talk about the persona, you talk about the problem, but often the product itself somehow disappears behind the full funnel strategy.
But isn't that what demand generation is all about, though? Talking about stuff that is not necessarily a product, so that the people that are not in market for that product can get to know more about the product sooner or later?
I've never seen that to work. The only thing I've ever seen to work is to talk about the product, get the relevant people to know about the product, get the relevant people to understand why it's a great product, and then cross your fingers that they'll remember it when the time is right and they're in market for that kind of product. So I do think that, yes, of course, most of the people, probably even more than 95%, are not in market for your product at a given time. And you should definitely advertise to this segment of the population at any given point. But even if they're not in market for your product, they should still be continuously exposed to marketing materials that discuss your product, because that's your end goal. Ultimately, you want them to know what you're doing and why it's great. So if they're now switching jobs and they suddenly need it, they remember you, because if someone asks them on a Facebook group If they have a recommendation, they can say that they heard somewhere about your product. That's how products gain traction, by the fact that the relevant people know about them. And there's really no other way to achieve that except focusing your messaging across all your ad channels on the product itself. Show it, talk about it, explain it, share testimonials about it. Everything to make sure your end customer, your end user will understand what you're doing. Because sometimes it really drives me nuts that there are brands, big brands with considerable budgets that have been targeting me for a very long time, and accepted the fact that they are some kind of MarTech tool. I have absolutely no idea what they're doing. I know that they have a great thought leadership team and that the founder is very charismatic, but I don't know much about the product.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, we could go on a whole debate here on whether this changes for services and products, like if it's different or not. I would argue that it's not that different. And from my experience, being able, sure, I'm able to convey our value prop in 30 seconds. We have ads that do that, and those are good for the cold layer. But then we would target those people with thought leadership, industry insights. Other clips are not necessarily about our product or service, basically, but because we're not selling a product, but understanding our service as a product. They're not. It's not product marketing anymore, but it's marketing about why we do what we do, the knowledge that we have about the industries that we work with, stuff that gets people over the line a lot of times. So I can see, and I've seen how that applies to SaaS as well, but I can see also how it's more important to figure out the way in which you're going to convey your value prop in 30 seconds for the call layer, because that's what's going to drive everything else, right? So do you want to touch on that before we move on? But
yes, because I do think that there is a difference between services and SaaS in this regard. First of all, services do rely a lot more on trust than product. People work with me, B2B SaaS companies work with me because they trust me that I'm an expert in my field. But when an enterprise evaluates a new CRM, they don't care if the founder is an expert in the field. They care if the product is great.
I would slightly disagree there, because there is, I mean, why do you think a lot of people have bought Hockey Stack, for example? I can tell you for sure it is thanks to a lot of the content that the founding team publishes. And it's because the founding team demonstrates enough competence and knowledge about the industry that, that already, even if subconsciously, and even if without enough fundamental arguments, even then, subconsciously, people are choosing Hockey Stack in their consideration set over another brand just because of the tie, whether emotionally, subconsciously, rationally or not. I don't care how that tie is created, but that content from the founding team is doing something clearly. Like, this is one of the base case studies for founder brand, or the impact that it can have. I think there's other products as well, but right. So I mean, we can agree to disagree, but I would disagree with the fact that a founder of a product having extensive and deep knowledge about their industry doesn't affect buyers when taking them into the consideration set, even if the product is utilitarian,
So I think that in the Hockey Stack example, I can see your point. But I think that the content is interesting because it often revolves around the product, or they talk about insights that users of the products have generated thanks to the product. They're not talking about like the future of B2B SaaS. They give okay, we onboarded a Fortune 500 company. Before us, they used first start attribution. Now that they implemented Hockey Stack, they actually realized X, Y, and Z. And that gives you, as an executive in a Fortune 500 company, a very clear idea of how working with the Hockey Stack team is actually going to look like. What kind of benefits can you achieve from working with them? So I'm not against content, and I think that if your product is of the kind that can generate relevant content that is about the product, then it's definitely a great angle. But I do think that we are talking about the edge cases here, and that most products are not there. Most products do not generate the kind of content that is related enough to the product itself.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I mean, I can give you a point of like thought leadership needs to stay as close as possible to revolve around the product marketing sphere of content in a way. Like it cannot go that meta or like that far away from the product, which is, let's call that the ground basically. It cannot fly that much, because otherwise it removes the tie to the business impact basically. Like if it's not about the product in some shape or form, directly or indirectly, then it won't have as much business impact, right? Like of course this doesn't mean post about your dog and then you'll get clients, like of course not, right? Like I'm not, I know that there's two sides of the spectrum as well on how to apply founder brand, and like there's someone that does it like really tied to hockey stick is a great example because of that, because as you said, right, a lot of the insights, a lot of the thought leadership is directly tied to the product and or a consequence of building the product, and that's how it should be. And that was my point in a way, right? Like it can be not only about the product, and all of that content can get a lot of people over the line, and that doesn't get done with one ad. But coming back to our initial point, for that one ad to be created, which is really important to have it, I think you need to have several, brand assets, so to speak, or like, several assets that convey your value prop and different messaging for different personas, depending on how many go-to-market motions you're running, or like how many markets are you, segments are you targeting. You got to have one asset for that code layer that conveys your value prop in the shortest time possible, and that resonates with that persona, right? So in order to create that, let's get technical here. Like why most people fail at this, like most B2B companies, they drop this challenge because it's too hard. And what is kind of like your framework, your process to go through this, like from the positioning and research part of the work to the production and editing, post production, and launching and then optimizing part of the process?
So one thing that I always ask my clients in kickoff calls when I try to understand what will be the creative concept is, what's great about your product? Why do your customers actually purchase it? What kind of use case, what kind of specific problem brought them to the table? And the importance here is to understand that it's not supposed to be about benefits, something like increase revenue, but it needs to be something more specific. It needs to be a story about very specific problems and very specific capabilities. It's not values, but capabilities that your product has, and that you leverage to solve those problems. So ultimately, it's about understanding what the product does and why it's great to do so, and then finding an entertaining way to present it.
Yeah, I mean, I know, but like, can you develop farther on that process? Like, how do you go about this? Because I'm sure you've encountered a lot of it. Like, what type of questions do you ask your clients to? Sure, that is a good one. Like, what makes your product great? What is making people buy? What is creating that wow effect within your buyers? Sometimes they might not know though, right? Do you do any sort of customer research or analysis in partnership with someone else to figure this out in some cases? Do you qualify them before the call so that they need to have a certain set of resources to make sure that you're going to be able to figure this out? Like, do you refer to competitors' ads? Like, what is kind of like the checklist that you go through to kind of like figure this out? Yeah.
So sometimes I'll listen to gong calls if they have any, but generally speaking, I usually work directly with the founders or with the VP marketing, and they'll often have their answers. They're not always the right answers, but they'll be a starting point. And often, that's actually something more general. I think that when you start running a campaign, a paid ads campaign, you need to, the best way, the best experiments you can run are ones that regard to messaging. Because for B2B, you don't have a lot of channels. Okay, most likely it's going to be Google and LinkedIn, and Google isn't interesting for our case. So we're talking about LinkedIn ads most of the time. And also, very often, you can't experiment much about with regard to targeting. Sometimes there is a very specific list of companies that's relevant to you, or a very specific list of titles that are relevant. And yes, you need to be proficient enough in how LinkedIn ads work in order to get to those people while paying the lowest CPM possible. But you don't need to be a genius to do so. And really, ultimately, it's a commodity. There's not much you can do. The thing that you can experiment with, the thing that can be a game changer with regards to how your campaigns perform, is the message, which is why I said that the founders of VP marketing will often have their idea, and it might not be the right idea, but it will be a starting point. And this starting point will give us something to work with, to start getting some feedback from the audience, start getting some comments on the video, start getting some sales calls, start understanding what's going on those calls, and adjust the messaging accordingly. This is the reason that with all my clients, we create several ads. We start with one or two ads. We gain some feedback. We try to understand if it's even the right use case. Okay, because B2B products are complicated, and you can look at them from different angles. As I'm just starting to work now with some data company, and they have a data lineage tool, and they have a code scanning tool, and it's the same tool, but these are two different capabilities. So the first discussion we have is, okay, how should we present your tool? As a code scanning tool or as a data lineage tool? And you don't always get this decision right at first, but it gives you something to experiment with. And so really that's the first answer I'm trying to get. That's the first decision that I'm trying to make when I plan a creative, is what's the product, the actual product that we're going to advertise.
The capability of the product, more specifically. That's
Yes,
what.
exactly. Yes, exactly. What aspect of the product are we going to show to the world?
This podcast is brought to you by FounderVideo. We'll cut your LinkedIn ads costs by at least 50% with natural-looking creatives that prospects actually want to consume. Just have an expert in your C-suite show up to a 90-minute interview once a month and let us take care of the rest. Turn LinkedIn ads from an accepted line item expense into a scalable revenue channel that fits into your go-to-market strategy. Book a free consultation at FounderVideo.io.
And to figure which one to prioritize, if it's a product with, dozens of capabilities, because there's many, like platforms, like Gong, for example. You can use Gong for so many things, right? You can use Slack for so many things. You can use so many Atlassian. I don't know, like there's so many tech companies that have so many products as well, and product offerings and capabilities. How do you bring it down to know which one you want to focus on? Like, do clients already give you a restriction on, like, okay, we're doing a campaign for this region and this persona and this market, whatever, and we have this goal? And do you work granularly on that campaign specifically, or do you take over the entire LinkedIn ads account and therefore need to figure out which one is per market segment, vertical? I don't know. And how do you weight which ones are worth prioritizing on?
So most of my clients are startups that raised either a B round or a C round. And so they don't have this problem that huge companies have, such as Atlassian, that they have so many products. Most of my clients have a single product, but it simply has different phases. Now, of course, if you're a huge product such as Gong, then that means that you have a lot of options. You can target marketeers with one proposal, can target sales directors with another. that simply translates to multiple campaigns. But for each campaign, for each persona, it's still the same question that arises. What capabilities of the product are relevant? What capabilities of the product are cool? What capabilities of the product are interesting for that specific segment of the population?
Okay, that makes it easier because if you were to work with a company that has so many products, I mean, they would need like five people like you, right? Or 10 or like, right. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. So, okay, we talked about the segments. You just to recap, right? Like you focus on the capabilities of the product, and then you take the capability that in some shape or form has had more validation to close won deals. I'm assuming, right? Do you do any type of reverse engineering with deals as well to get more insight into this and kind of like figure out the verbatim of the clients on how to deliver that pain or communicate it?
So again, I mostly rely on the words of the founders, on how they transmission this message from the client, from the ad client. But what I like to do is to go over LinkedIn profiles of customers with the founders, so I get a better sense of who are these people. Are they 50-year-old executives in Fortune 100 companies? Are they millennial marketing managers? Who are you selling to? So that's one thing I like to do.
I like that. I like that. I mean, gone calls is the best if they have them, right? Like just hearing to them, and again, I think this is all pointing down because again, we could talk about the technical side of things, like what things can you actually do to figure this out. It's more, but it all comes down to getting to read the ICP's minds basically and understanding, reverse engineering what's been won, and understanding, sorry, why that has happened, what was the initial touch or the critical event, the critical event, the event that prompted them to make a decision on the product that put them in market. How can we find more of that? How can we refer that in the ad? That sort of stuff. I'm assuming, do you want to talk or touch on different like script frameworks that you usually use or like styles, and where you get your inspiration for the quote unquote TikTok style ads for B2B products? Because I find that really interesting. You posted some on your LinkedIn. I mean, that was the first reason I reached out, because I think those are, ClickUp has done a really great job, I think, with this too, like with the role play between Jira and ClickUp. I don't know if you're familiar with that ad, but whatever. Do you have any patterns? Have you seen any patterns of what's working best now, and like where do you get your inspiration from for that?
Yeah, so generally speaking, I'll tell you what, where I never get my inspiration from is from competitors, because I just found that they're always boring. So what instead I'm doing is I try to get my inspiration from two sources. One is simply like consumer culture or TikTok culture, the kind of videos that organically pop up on Instagram and TikTok. That's the best. That's the best for two reasons. First of all, it gives you a format that is engaging, and you know that it's engaging. And second, because no one else is doing it on LinkedIn, everyone are doing a serious podcast like the one we are talking in now. So boring. And so it's really out of the ordinary, so people pay attention. So really what I'm trying to do is to scroll through Instagram Reels and try to find cool trends I can copy. And also I'm trying to look at what B2C2B companies such as Grammarly or such as Monday.com are doing, because I often find that they cracked the code. That, D2C, like direct to consumer companies, it's too far removed. Okay, you can't copy what a company selling shoes does, because really all this company needs to do is to show the shoes. Now, it's not so easy when it comes to B2B SaaS, right? But so what I like about companies such as Grammarly is that they take a product that is really boring. I mean, it fixes your
It
glass.
is. Yeah.
It's a boring product. It's an amazing product, but it's super boring, and they make it exciting. And I think that's something that's really missing in B2B SaaS.
That's interesting. Do you think that it becomes easier when you have a B2C to B model? Like, because at the end of the day, if you're selling into consumer first and then selling to business, you can also, I think, like leveraging the consumer culture drives a bigger impact, right? So how do we take this insight? Because I think you're absolutely right. And you made good points right there on why it works, getting insight from consumer culture for LinkedIn, nobody's doing it, whatever. But also it just gives you this social awareness that most people in B2B SaaS seemingly don't have, right? Like that's the truth. Like there's a lot of people in corporate, especially, and B2B SaaS, it has a lot of corporate because it sells into corporate a lot of times, especially in the enterprise segments. But my take is that there's too many people in B2B SaaS that have lost or are detached from their social awareness instinct and their intuition on how they behave socially is totally different on how they're behaving at work, and they're not following the same principles that they would with their personal relationships, and that's a problem. That's a big problem, and that impacts all departments, both internally and externally, I think. And I think being aware and nurturing yourself as a marketer in B2B SaaS with consumer culture gives you a certain edge in terms of social awareness and intelligence on how to read people to create better advertising. So that's why I think it works. But now I want to ask you, do you think if having a B2C to B model makes this easier, or how do we take this insight and make it useful for an enterprise software company?
So I do take inspiration from B2B, from B2C to B companies, but it's not the same challenge. Okay, Grammarly is a boring product, but it's a simple product. Okay, that's why it's, I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's easier to make it exciting. Okay, because it doesn't take you more than 2 seconds to understand what it does. That's why I think that the most important part of creating great creatives for B2B SaaS is to be able to formulate in a single sentence what is it that your product does? What is it that your product do? And I find that it's missing for most ad creatives. This simple one line explanation of what is the product.
Because it's a hard exercise. It's hard to bring it down, especially if you're an enterprise software company. But you should be able to. I'm thinking of Hockey Stack, for example, comes to mind, right? I think they're pushing. I don't know if they're picking that as the one-liner, but I think they should, because one of the messaging that they've been pushing on how to explain what the product does in a one-liner is figure out what's working and what isn't, basically.
Yeah,
And that's a perfect way to put it, because that's what they do, right? Dream Data also has good messaging around this. I think SenseSpark has figured it out pretty quickly. It's not that hard if you have the engineering product with you as well, like the engineering team, and like if you make this a company initiative, it shouldn't be that hard. The problem is when technical co-founding teams think a hired marketing team should figure this out by their own. That's kind of where where the bottleneck happens. Or sales, go figure it out. Go watch Gong calls. But then you have a technical co-founding team that's like, you guys should figure this out because we're technical and we don't know. And I don't think that should be the case at all.
That's a good point. I do think that many marketeers are not technical enough, and many technical founders
That too is it goes both ways. Yeah.
Yes,
Exactly.
definitely. But I also think that part of the issue is also that marketers need to be able to push back when talking to founders. Because something that often happens when I try to formulate this one line value proposition, not value proposition. I don't like the term value proposition because I don't like the terms value. A value is like benefits. It's so vague. I like to talk about capabilities, about what the product actually does. So when I try to explain what the product actually does, I always get this pushback that, wait, but we're also doing this, and it's not really accurate because most of our clients have already tried to implement this and this in-house, so our real advantage is this and this. And what I always say is that it's all true. And realistically, a complex B2B SaaS product cannot truly be explained in one line. But that's not your goal. Your goal as a marketer is to get someone to take the sales call. You want them to get interested enough that they will fill out the form and go on the call. And that's something that is possible in 30 seconds. And it won't capture exactly what your product does, but it should be good enough. And that's really the ultimate test here. Yes, I'm a performance marketeer. The ultimate test is really whether this creative generated meetings and where those meetings qualified. That's the ultimate end goal, and that's the ultimate test if a messaging works.
And with qualified also implying at what rate they get won, of course, right? Because the higher
Yeah,
the
but
rate.
that's a very long tail signal. It's
Oh yeah, it is. But I think a marketing team should have their eye on that too, because it will help them understand better how to drive better opportunities.
yes, but I think
Sales should be more on that too, but
yeah, exactly. The thing is that I think that's more on sales side, and I think that marketing should aim to deliver leads that sales are happy to get. And then it's a sales job to convert them. And if those leads are not good enough, that's a problem that sales should raise the flag and let the marketing know. But
totally.
I do think that marketing teams should aim for pipeline, for qualified pipeline. And if that qualified pipeline ultimately doesn't convert to revenue, then that means that the sales team have a problem with how they define qualified pipeline.
And how they drive the sales process entirely too,
Yeah.
not just the definition of pipeline, but yeah, there's maybe it's the definition of pipeline, maybe it might be something else in the sales process, but it's definitely sales responsibility to close qualified pipeline, of course. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. People talk about MQLs, SQLs. Usually when I talk to my clients and we try to define the goal of the campaign, what I tell them is this: I'm trying to generate meetings with people who fit your ICP and are interested in learning more about your product. Simple as that.
Simple as that. Let me pick back up this insight, and before we get, I know I haven't even looked at the questions for this whole time, but because we're in a good conversation here. But like, I want to pick back up the point that we were riffing on at the beginning, which is the in market versus out market and demand generation effort and retargeting, and whether it's convenient or not to do it, and how meta or how disconnected you can be from your product marketing points or pillars to drive a business impact. My question for you is this: if you so let's assume you get a great creative or a great set of creatives that resonate enough with the personas that care about the different capabilities that your product has, no matter how many of those are. You do that, you get a code layer, and the code layer works. You drive meetings, sales is doing their job, you get a qualified pipeline from those ads, and then you get close won revenue at a certain rate, right? Ideally, a proper win rate that's above 10%, not just a 0.1 or as many companies are getting. Okay, that is happening. Now, you're capturing the in-market demand. Can a marketer do something about the out-market segment? And if so, what can they do about it? Meaning, is it even possible? Is it even worth posing the question of can a marketer, and this is as quite not to say that I'm in agreement or in disagreement with any of these points. I'm just saying, how much can a marketer do to drive revenue through an out market segment sooner or later? Let's forget about the timelines here. How much can a marketer do to drive revenue through the out market by marketing to the out market segments? And how can they do so if they can do anything about it?
So, it really depends on how you think about this term, out market segment. Because I can think about it in two ways. The first is, let's say that I'm a CMO and I have some email marketing system and I have a contract now for 4 years. And so for the next 4 years, I'm out of market. Okay, that's one way to think about it. And about in these kind of situations, you still want to get in front of the CMO and get him to learn about your product, your email marketing system, because at one point or another, he'll be in market again. Another case is where the target audience doesn't even care about your product. They're not out of market because they already have a solution, but they're out of market because they don't even have the problem. And I think that in most of those cases, that's actually a product problem that appears as a marketing problem. And honestly, there's very little that marketers can do about it. That's why I started the conversation.
Just to describe that point, can see definitely a lot of marketers trying to fix product problems, and it happens too often. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
And which brings me back to how we started the call about why I see that, why the way I'm doing marketing at least is quite simple. Because I think there's really nothing to be done about those so-called complex cases where people are simply not interested in the problem. If there is no problem, you won't be able to sell the product. And if people are interested in the problem, the only thing you need to do is to advertise the product properly, to show the product, speak about it, explain what it does.
Through the problems lens, always, not through the products lens, because there's a nuance we haven't made here that is really important, because people mistaken or mismatch, like they think that product marketing it's a synonym to being company centric, and it's not about that at all. I think there's two different ways to convey capabilities of products. One is feature focused, and the other is problem focused or problem solution focused, right? Versus feature focused. It's a really important nuance, because advertisers could be saying, "Oh no, but we're talking about the product capabilities in the ads." Yeah, sure, but not in a way that speaks to the problem, right? Therefore, people don't get it, or they don't want to buy.
So I think I'm not a fan of talking not about features and or about problems. I like to think about it as, again, explaining what the product does.
It's the
And
whole, yeah.
And when you explain what the product does, you can focus in one ad more about the problem. Okay, for example, I'm working with a company in the IT space, and I just created an ad where the first 15 seconds do not discuss the product at all, but rather a common way the directors are doing IT discovery, infrastructure discovery. Okay, that's really focusing on the problem. But of course, right after those 15 seconds, I go straight into how this IT product does it differently. So I wouldn't say that, but in other cases, I like to start off like from the go with, this is what we do. We discover your infrastructure. So that's why
I
I
get
use
you.
multiple ads, because I want to show the product from different points of view. You can talk about the problem it solves. You can talk about why it's better than the competition. You can talk about why it makes your life great. But it should all be about the product. And the product is not the features. The product is the capabilities. The product is what it allows you to do.
That's the nuance I mean. Like it's not the same to explain a feature and a capability. And one can be company centric, so to speak, but it can still resonate. The issue is when we're talking about a feature in a superficial way, and not in a way that conveys the actual impact that it creates using the solution. Because a lot of B2B SaaS companies talk about their products from a superficial surface level point of view. They don't talk as if like they're talking about the product as if nobody would adopt it. Like they don't talk about what the product does when you adopt it. They talk about what it could do. So it's meaningless, right? Whereas what you're saying is like, and that's what I mean. That's the nuance that's missing there that most people don't get. It's like, sure, you can talk about the features, you can talk about the product, you can talk from the different perspective, the different POVs, and you got to test both the problem solution side of things and the feature side of things, or like why you do. But the point here is to convey the impact that using the product generates, which is, you said it really well, capabilities. That's the word, right? That's the capability that the product has. Companies speak about a conditional capability, because they miss the adoption. They miss the impact side of things. They miss the what happens when I use this product and how does that impact me. They didn't put that together in the same ad. They do that through 20 different ads, and therefore nobody right, like because it gets just distributed not evenly. They get some people know about parts of the product and why, but it needs all to be in one ad, because otherwise the message is not conveyed, right? It's all about conveying a message, something that has depth in it, and for that you got to wrap it in a way that involves, at least consciousness of both sides of the spectrum, right? Super interesting though. We talked already about when and why founder-led content works and why it doesn't sometimes. And I think the conclusion there, right, with the hockey stick example is like you cannot go too far from the product, because otherwise it gets unrelated and therefore doesn't drive a business impact. The further you go away from the product, the farther you go away from driving a business impact, which I agree with. Now let's talk about, and I know you wanted to mention an ad that you've seen recently. Why does B2B need Hollywood-like productions to make ads that work? I'm of the opinion that, of course, you don't necessarily, but I think we can learn a lot as well from the principles that are applied at Hollywood and or at the just creative industry in general. Because again, it comes back down to what we said before of nurturing yourself of the consumer culture to then, drive something that actually resonates at a deeper level than most B2B ads. So if so, why? And if not, what's the alternative to having Hollywood-like production means?
So first of all, some B2B companies do invest considerable amount of resources in Hollywood-like productions. For example, Palo Alto Networks just released a new ad with Keanu Reeves. And honestly, I don't like saying bad things about other people's work, but I'm sorry, Palo Alto, it's a horrible ad. It's a completely horrible ad. If I wouldn't know what Palo Alto does, I wouldn't even know that this ad is about cybersecurity product. And I still have no idea what they were trying to advertise there, except that it has something to do with AI. So I think that that's just an example of how you can take Hollywood level ads and still make them crappy simply by not telling a compelling story. And I think that's really the thing here. There's a value to making these crazy productions, okay? D2C brands do it all the time, and they do it for a good reason, because it creates trust. It creates trust to know that someone spent $200,000 on a production. It signals that you're a big company, and in B2B, it is important. If I'm now in market for a CNAP solution, and someone from Palo Alto will give me a call, yeah, I'll take that meeting, because otherwise I'd be irresponsible. I mean, I'm going to spend $100,000 on a solution. I better take the call from the leading company in the space. But it's not enough. It's not enough to convey that you're a big company with a lot of budget. You also have to make use of this budget to tell a compelling story about your product's capabilities. So I definitely think there's room for that, but I think that most B2B SaaS underestimate what they can achieve with much lower budgets, just by agreeing to, by not playing according to the unwritten rules of B2B, just by making things slightly different, just by making things unpolished. Because then you can, when you go down that route, you can experiment with multiple ads, because it doesn't take you a quarter to produce it. It takes you 2 weeks, and it doesn't cost you $200,000. It costs you $2,000, and you don't need Keanu Reeves. You can use actors you found on Fiverr.
Totally. That puts me in my next question that I had. How to source and hire paid actors. What do you look for and where? I mean, sure, Fiverr, but there's so much stuff in Fiverr, right? I mean, I wouldn't pick the first actor I can find in Fiverr. So I'm sure you have a list or people that you work with recurringly already, but is there So I don't know. I'm not deep into it. Is there like a marketplace specifically for like paid actors that have experience with B2B SaaS, or like do you just go to freelance platforms and then do a usual hiring process? Or
So I've tried a couple of dedicated platforms, but I actually wasn't impressed. So I'm now using mainly Upwork and Fiverr. And as for what I'm looking for, that's an interesting question, because what's funny is that there's often a difference between what I'm looking for and what my clients are looking for. Often my clients will want someone that looks like their ICP. And I will often try to convince them to go with someone that doesn't look like their ICP, because I am not trying to hide the fact with my TikTok style ads that those are fake. I want to, even in certain cases, highlight that it's fake so as to not misrepresent, to make false claims. So I don't think that the actor needs to look like the ICP. If you're selling to IT teams, the actor doesn't have to look like an IT director. And they need to what they need to do is to be a great actor. They need to be able to follow instructions well. They need to use the right tone of voice at the right time. They need to be expressive in the right places, and they need to express what you as the director want them to express, but they don't need to look like they work in a corporate.
totally, because even then, like, what does an IT director look like even, right? Like, is it even right to think about? I mean, like you get there are patterns, but like I don't think that's the way you put it perfectly. It's more so about how able we come back to capabilities. How able are they of conveying the message in the most effective way, right? That's what matters the most. And I think it just comes off from such a different mindset to think of, oh, we need an actor that matches our ICP because that way they're gonna feel that we care about them. And it comes from such a different perspective than saying, no, I need someone that is actually able to convey the type of energy that I want to, because otherwise this script won't go anywhere, right? Because this script is as strong and as effective as the person that's using it and making it a reality, both through the tonality, through the voice, through the energy, through the emotion, through the video, through the cuts, the frames, everything, right? It's a whole thing. And that's why I think the test here is just like, if you don't know how to do this properly, it's because you probably can't, you're not the type of person who gets an ad shown and isn't able to tell if it's good or not, or if it's effective or not, if it's working or not, without looking at the numbers, right? And if you're not that kind of person, that you shouldn't be doing advertising at all. Like, that's just it. And sure, it's an art, and you learn as you go. But there's a lot of people, apparently, I would guess, I think that is at least my take, doing advertising that don't have that ability naturally, right? That are, especially now that there's this whole debate of revenue marketing and how technical marketing has gotten and whatnot. I mean, sure, we're dealing with tools and everything, but it's all no code. Like, it's not that technical. Like, it's all it still is and will always be about human psychology, right? And yeah, the more detached you get from that, the less you make it to work, I think. At least that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's for this exact reason that that I'm thinking about myself, not much in terms of PPC or B2B marketing, but in terms of traditional advertising. What I'm doing is I advertise products. Some people advertise Coca-Cola. I advertise B2B SaaS.
Totally. When we spoke for the first time, we mentioned Mad Men style. That's it. Like, that's about it. When you know how to do it, and you don't need all this fancy tooling, attribution, all that stuff. Like, no, man, it's about getting the messaging right. But it's way harder. That's for sure. It's way harder than dealing with metric and doing automations and all, which is good too. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people in the market that should be in other areas, maybe. Onto that, because I think this is a part that actually marketing can impact a lot, and there's work to be done. And I wonder what's your take here, and like how much work you do in that area, in that arena, which is the fixing the lead to meeting ratio. This arguably falls some sort of under the umbrella of sales, because is like the show operate basically, and that should be sales that are doing the reminder flows and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it also has a lot to do with, how qualified the leads that you give from marketing are, and how good is the experience when they book a meeting through their ad. Is it frictionless? Is it in a siloed landing page? Is it there's a lot of optimizations that marketing can do in that process. The offer, I think it's three things: the offer that you put in the ad, the conversion mechanism, how that looks UI wise, and how frictionless it is, and what do you ask for them, like fields and whatnot, and that ties into qualification as well. And then the handoff to sales, like what is the automation, what is the process that goes into handing that off to sales, what information is shared, when and how. Yeah, just want to know, like, kind of like how you work on this.
So I think that the major issue with the ratio from lead to meeting is when you're using LinkedIn's native lead gen forms, which makes sense because those forms are pre-populated, and so people don't need to put a lot of thought into filling them. And so if it takes you too long to reach back to them, they might forget even clicking that button in the first place. So what I'm saying is that when using landing pages, you don't have as much of a problem. Assuming that your sales team reaches back in a reasonable time, if someone took the time to go to your website, research it, read through it, and to fill the form, they're probably going to take the call. Okay? They spent a considerable amount of energy in doing so. So you shouldn't have a problem with transforming those leads into calls. This problem occurs when you're using either lead forms in LinkedIn or if you're using gated content, okay, which I'm not a fan of at all. I don't do gated content at all for none of my clients. I only do book a demo, direct response ads, because really that's what clients want. They want meetings with their ICP, and the way to get it is not to trick your prospects into giving you your details, but just explaining to them why they should go on a call, which is why I'm trying to do with my ads. That being said, with lead gen forms, it is somewhat of a different story, because it happens quite often that you'll have a direct response campaign on LinkedIn ads, and the call to action will be book a demo, and people will fill the form, and then you'll still have a very low ratio between lead to meeting. And in those cases, I'll tell you first of all what I never do is I never ask only for the work email. And that's something that a lot of people want to do. They want to just not use the pre-populated email option, but instead use the work email option, which requires the users to manually type their email. I don't do it because my experience has been that you get the worst of both worlds. On the one hand, you get a very low conversion rate from click to lead, similar to the one that you'll get in a landing page. But unlike a landing page, you don't get the same high intent from a user who actually went to your website and read through it. So that's what I don't do. What I do is I usually recommend a certain playbook to my clients. I recommend them that whenever a lead arrives from a LinkedIn lead gen form, again with a call to action to book a demo, first of all, to reach out to them within an hour, if possible, and reach out to them with a calendar invite. Just immediately send them a calendar invite for, let's say, 2 days from now in the relevant time zone, and follow that calendar invite with an email saying, "Hi, I received your demo request. I sent you an invite for this and that time. If that doesn't work for you, let me know and we'll schedule a different time." That's a very aggressive move, but my experience is that it's the best way to convert lead gen forms leads.
I don't think it's aggressive. I mean, they requested the demo. Here's your demo. Like that's
I agree.
it is not aggressive at all. It's what you should be doing. Like it's like what are you getting? What are you trying to get demo requests for then? If you're not gonna give them the demo, right? Like there's maybe products out there that are taking like 3 weeks and longer to get you the demo when you request it. If you're an SMB customer.
Yeah.
That's the truth. Okay, now to wrap up, I think so. To recap what you said on the lead to meeting ratio, it's mostly about landing page better than lead gen forms because what you said right there, the friction, asking for the work email, it's just, you get the worst of both worlds if you do lead gen forms. So landing, book a demo CTA, and then on the handoff, 1 hour calendar invite email with, if that doesn't work, just let me know what time we're meeting. Requires
That
go ahead.
I have a rule of thumb that I also, if it's a Series A startup, I'll almost never use Legion forms, because what I found is that Legion forms work very well when you have like an army of hungry and well-trained SDRs that have done a lot of outbound, and then they know how to handle those low intent legion, and then it also makes sense to use them because the volume compensates for the intent. But if your sales team is composed only of account executives that are also reaching out to inbound leads, they won't have the capabilities to handle that low intent. They'll be frustrated, and in those cases it's better to go straight to landing pages.
Yeah, I agree. So for Series B, then once they have a more established sales force that is well, that they might have it, they might don't have it, even if they're in Series B. But like if they do have a solid outbound force, someone like a sales team that has been really experienced with outbound and used to deal with a lot of lead volume, that is able to handle low intent leads, then it makes some sense to do lead gen forms to get that. Okay, that's interesting. It's really interesting. Speed to lead, of course, down to the hour. That's ideal. And then, yeah, I think that we didn't miss any. Well, the offers, book a call. Yeah, we touched on everything. Now, to wrap up, I wanted to ask you this question because you make certain LinkedIn posts making this point, and I think is a good one. And especially as a LinkedIn, I mean, you're a consultant. Do you have a team? Like you work with freelancers usually,
I work
right?
with freelancers.
You don't have, okay. So as a consultant in such a competitive market, you're getting good accounts as clients. What has been your biggest learning on how to build trust with clients? Especially, I don't know if you want to talk pricing here or not. I'm assuming not, but I know you work on a quarterly basis. You do few creatives. I don't know if you want to give it a little bit detail into that, because I think it's tied, right? Like you're offering with how much trust you need to build for it to be sold, and then how have you built that trust with them, both on the like pre-acquisition side, like through marketing and in the sales process, and also on the retention side of things, like with the actual engagement.
Okay, so I think that the main thing I do to build trust is, first of all, to build trust with my existing clients. And that's where I think that many agencies fail. They fail because they want to look good and they want to feel that they succeed, even when in fact they don't. And I never bullshit my client. When the campaign isn't working, that's just what I say. And of course, I always make sure to follow up with what I plan to do to make it work. But what I've seen, because in the past I've been an in-house marketeer, I managed agencies, and what I saw is that they'll try to evade the fact that no SQLs were generated or no MQLs were generated. They'll show like, hey, we managed to improve the CTR on your Google Ads from 0.3% to 0.5%. And I don't care about that. As a business stakeholder, as a marketing executive, you don't care about that. Those are technicalities. And unless it's really relevant, I don't bother my clients with this kind of resolution. If I'll talk to them about CTRs, it will only be in the context that I think that our problem is with the messaging because I'm seeing a very low CTR. But the metrics that I'll discuss with them are always business metrics. How many leads did we receive? How many meetings were booked? How many meetings were qualified? Those are the things that create trust. Because, when things do not go well, the client knows it. If you don't get enough leads, the client knows it. And what they need to feel is confident that you are, as a consultant, is first aware of that, you understand that something is wrong, and that you are on top of things, that you know, or at least have a plan on how to fix them. And so when it comes to building trust, that's the main thing. Okay, I'm talking about metrics that they care about and only about them. And this way, when about building trust with prospects, I often just let my clients speak with my prospects. I'm doing referrals, and most of my business comes from word to mouth.
Interesting. Good stuff. Really great podcast, I think. I think we a lot of insights in here, a lot of good advice. Anything you like to promote? Like, I don't know, like people can reach you on LinkedIn, of course.
Yeah, so you can find me on LinkedIn. My name is Itamar Ben Yair, and where I post about B2B marketing, and I also post a lot of examples for the creatives that I produce.
Yep, you already know. We'll hopefully soon have you back again at some point to touch deeper into creatives, ads. It's been a pleasure. I think this was a really great conversation. And yeah, thank you for coming again.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome.
Thank you for listening to the FounderVideo podcast with Will Martin, and we'll see you on the next episode.